There are 21 old stamps that are secretly worth a fortune in 2026, and you might own one of them without having the faintest idea. Not the framed showpieces the family already knows about. I mean the ordinary albums, the shoebox of loose stamps, the biscuit tin of old envelopes, the schoolboy collection that went up to the loft when somebody grew up and never came down. Every stamp tonight is real, every price is a real sale, and every one of them hides in albums exactly like the ones in your house. And the item at number 1, the one I am saving for last, is a stamp that sits unnoticed in ordinary Victorian collections all over Britain, and examples of it have sold for well over £100,000, which is more than $130,000. By the end of this video, you will go through every album in the house with a magnifying glass, and you will never again turn a page without stopping. Let me be honest with you before we open the album, because false hope is the enemy of good judgment. Most old stamps are worth very little. The thick schoolboy albums of the 1960s, stuffed with common issues, soaked off holiday postcards, are worth $10 or $20 for the lot, and no amount of hoping changes that. But here is what 40 years in the trade taught me. Stamps are the category with the widest gap of all between what a thing looks like and what a thing is, because a rarity and a common stamp can look absolutely identical to the naked eye, and the entire difference is a tiny number in the corner, a missing perforation, or the envelope it is still stuck to. In almost every collection I ever handled, there were 1 or 2 stamps worth more than the whole rest of the album, and the family never knew which. Now, before we carry on, let me say one thing. The support my channel has had lately has been overwhelming, and I mean that. So here's what I've decided. I'm not putting ads on these videos. You've given me your time, and I won't have it interrupted. If you'd like to support my channel, there's one way. You can scan the code on screen now with your phone's camera to get my book. I've put everything I know into one book, the Household and Collectibles Price Guide, 2027 edition. Every common item you might own, how to value it, and what it actually sells for. It even tells you where and how to sell it, who buys it, what they'll pay, and which route to take for which object. To get it, and everything I know, it's over at my website, malcolmashby.com. That's MALCOLMASHBY.com. Right, let's carry on. Common used commemoratives. We start at the bottom of the money and the top of the odds, because these fill every album in the land. The used decimal era stamps and the common commemorative sets, soaked off a lifetime of birthday post, are worth pennies, and I will not pretend otherwise. But complete mint sets with the original gum, never hinged and never mounted, do climb a little, and a full run kept pristine can surprise a family. Your test tonight, check whether the stamp is mint and unmounted, meaning there is no hinge mark or thin patch on the back, because in modern stamps, condition is very nearly the whole of the modest value there is, and a fingerprint or a crease is the difference between something and nothing. Number 20, first day covers. The envelopes posted on the day a new set of stamps came out carrying a special commemorative postmark. Most are worth $1 or $2 because they were made for collectors in very large numbers and everybody kept theirs. But the early ones from before the war and covers signed by a person genuinely connected to the stamp's subject, an astronaut, an athlete, a designer, sell for tens and hundreds. Your test tonight, look carefully at the date and at any signature, because an ordinary cover is just decorated stationery, and a cover tied to a real event or a real name is a piece of history that somebody out there is actively hunting for. Number 19, foreign holiday stamps. The colourful sheets brought back from abroad and stuck in the back of the album by a child who liked the pictures. Almost all are common. But early issues from small colonies and vanished countries can carry real money, and the names of those countries have changed so many times that a family no longer recognizes what they are looking at. Your test tonight, look for the country name and the date on every foreign stamp, because a stamp from a place that no longer exists under that name, printed in small numbers before the borders were redrawn, is exactly the kind that climbs steadily in value while everyone around it is ignored. Number 18. The schoolboy album itself. Do not throw the album away to keep only the loose stamps, because the way a collection was put together matters as much as the stamps in it. An untouched old album, assembled a century ago and never disturbed since, with its stamps still in place and its handwritten notes in faded ink, is worth more whole than it ever is picked apart. Dealers call an old collection in its original state a find, precisely because so few survive unmeddled with. Your test tonight: resist the very natural urge to rearrange, remount or upgrade anything, and take the album exactly as it is to a specialist, because the original arrangement is part of the record, part of the story and part of the value, and once you break it up, you can never put it back. Number 17. Victorian line engraved issues. Now we begin to climb. The penny black of 1840, the world's first stamp, and its cousin, the two-penny blue. A common used penny black is $25 to $50, more affordable than most people expect. But fine examples, particular plate numbers, and above all, a penny black still on its original letter can bring hundreds and thousands. Your test tonight: look at the letters in the corners and never ever peel a penny black off its envelope, because the stamp on the paper is worth far more than the stamp alone, and a family soaking one off in the sink can pour a small fortune down the drain in a minute. Number 16. The penny red and its plate numbers. The most common Victorian stamp of all, in millions of albums, most worth pennies. But the penny red was printed from hundreds of numbered plates, and the number hides tiny in the design. Plate 77 was faulty and nearly all destroyed, and a genuine penny red from plate 77 has sold for well over £100,000, which is more than $130,000. Your test tonight: take a magnifying glass to every penny red and read the plate number in the side frames, because the most valuable stamp in your album may look exactly like the 200 worthless ones around it. Number 15. Surface printed Victorian high values. The larger, more elaborate Victorian stamps that carried a high face value rather than the everyday penny. These were expensive when issued, so fewer were bought and fewer survive. Good examples sell for hundreds of dollars, and the top values in fine condition for thousands. Your test tonight: set aside any large Victorian stamp with a high face value and check the colour and the watermark, because the top values of the old Queen are among the most desirable stamps in the whole of British collecting. Number 14. Watermark and colour errors. Sometimes a stamp was printed on the wrong paper or in the wrong shade, and these mistakes are treasure, a colour that should not exist for that stamp, or a missing or inverted watermark turns pennies into hundreds and thousands. Your test tonight: learn to float a stamp face down in watermark fluid, or simply set aside anything whose colour looks wrong against the others, because the error your eye almost skips is the one the specialist is hunting for. Number 13. Imperforate and part perforate stamps. The earliest stamps were issued as full sheets without the perforations we know today, meaning they had to be cut apart with scissors, and later on some slipped through the presses with a row of perforations missing on one side by mistake. An imperforate pair still joined together, or a stamp missing its perforations along one edge, sells for many times the price of the normal version. Your test tonight: look closely at the edges of every early stamp, because a straight, smooth, uncut edge where there ought to be a neat row of little holes is not damage, and it is not trimming. It is very often a genuine rarity, and the untrained eye reads it as a stamp somebody spoiled with scissors. Number 12. The Commonwealth heads. The stamps of the old British colonies and dominions, printed with the monarch's head, are a vast and serious field. Early issues of small territories, printed in tiny quantities, sell for hundreds and thousands. Your test tonight: go through the colonial pages carefully and search the early low-population colonies by name, because a stamp from a tiny island in 1890 was printed for a handful of people and wanted now by collectors all over the world. Quick word: if you've got any old things at home, don't do anything with them yet, not till you know what they're worth. My full price guide, every common item you might own and what it sells for, is over at my website malcolmashby.com. That's MALCOLM ashby.com, or scan the code on your screen. Now back to it. Let me tell you what I mean about number 1, because it explains the whole game. The stamp at number 1 is not exotic. It is British, it is Victorian, and there are ordinary examples of the very same design in millions of albums worth almost nothing. What separates the rarity from the common one is a single tiny number that most collectors never even think to read, and once I show you where it is, you will check every one you own. Number 11, postal history and the envelope. And here is the reframe beginning early, because in this field, the envelope is often worth more than the stamp on it. A siege cover, a letter carried out of a besieged town, or a cover showing an unusual route can bring thousands of dollars because of where it traveled, not what stamp it wears. Your test tonight: never soak a stamp off an old envelope, because the postmark, the date, and the journey are the value, and a soaked stamp throws all of that in the bin. Number 10, wartime and censored mail. Letters that passed through war carry both history and money. Prisoner of war mail, censored covers, field post, and the letters of named soldiers sell to collectors and archives for tens and hundreds of dollars. Your test tonight: read the markings and the sender's name on every old wartime envelope, because a plain letter home becomes a documented human story the moment you can put a name and a place to it, and stories are what the market truly buys. Number 9, revenue and telegraph stamps. Not postage at all, but the stamps stuck on old documents, licenses, insurance policies, and telegraph forms to show that a duty or a fee had been paid. Families throw these away without a second glance as dull old paperwork, and there is the loss, because many revenue and telegraph stamps are far scarcer than the postage stamps of the very same age, printed for a narrow official purpose and never collected at the time, and they sell for hundreds. Your test tonight: look hard at old legal papers, share certificates, receipts, and licenses before you shred a single one, because the little stamp gummed into the corner of a Victorian document is sometimes the rarest thing in the entire box, sitting there precisely because nobody ever thought of it as a stamp to keep. Number 8, the classic European rarities. Now the numbers get serious. The first issues of the great European nations and their errors are worshipped. The Sweden Treskelling Yellow, a stamp printed by mistake in the wrong colour, is one of the most valuable objects by weight on Earth, having sold for over $2 million. Your test tonight: take any very early European stamp, especially one whose colour looks unusual, to a specialist, because a printing error on a first issue is the kind of thing that turns up once in a lifetime, and it turns up in old family collections. Number 7, the Great American Rarities. American collecting is deep and rich. The 1868 issue with a hidden pattern pressed into the paper called a grill includes the Z grill, of which almost none survive, and one sold for around $3 million. Early American issues and their varieties bring huge sums. Your test tonight: do not assume American stamps in a British album are worthless fillers, and photograph any early United States issue for a specialist, because the difference between a common stamp and a legendary one is often invisible without expert eyes. Number 6, the inverted center, the most famous mistake in all of stamp collecting. When a stamp was printed in 2 passes, occasionally the sheet went through upside down the second time, leaving the central picture inverted. The American inverted Jenny, showing an upside down aeroplane, is worth over $1 million a copy, and a block of them sold for millions. Your test tonight: look hard at any stamp with a central picture, an aeroplane, a ship, a building, and check whether it sits the right way up, because an inverted center is the single most valuable mistake a printer ever made. Number 5, the Chinese rarities, the most explosive field in modern stamp collecting. Certain stamps from the Cultural Revolution, withdrawn almost immediately for political reasons, are chased by Chinese collectors buying back their own history. One such stamp, showing the country in red, has sold for well over $1 million. Your test tonight: Set aside any Chinese stamps from the 1960s and 1970s and get them properly identified, because demand from China has not slowed in 20 years, and the withdrawn issues are the ones that matter most. Number 4. The colonial errors and rarities. The truly legendary stamps of the empire. The Mauritius Post Office issues of 1847, printed with the words Post Office by mistake, are among the most valuable stamps in the world, selling for over £1 million each, which is well over $1.3 million. The rarest single territory issues stand with them. Your test tonight: take any very early colonial stamp, especially from a small island, entirely seriously, because it was these ordinary-looking colonial stamps tucked in ordinary albums that made the greatest discoveries in the history of the hobby. Number 3. The tea caddy collection, and why an ordinary album can hide a fortune. I put this here because it happened just as I describe. During a house clearance in Gloucestershire, a tea caddy came down out of a loft, and inside was a stamp collection put together by somebody long dead and forgotten by everyone living. It was catalogued with a modest estimate, and it sold for £79,000, which is around $100,000, roughly 99 times what anyone expected. Your test tonight: take every unexamined old collection to a proper stamp auction house rather than a general dealer, because a general dealer prices it as an album and a specialist prices it as its best 12 stamps. Number 2. The British Guiana 1 cent magenta, and the biggest number in this entire video. I have placed it at number 2 on purpose, because number 2 is the one thing on tonight's list you will almost certainly never find. A single small, ugly, magenta-coloured stamp from British Guiana in 1856, the only one known to exist in the world, has sold for over $9 million, making it the most valuable object by size and weight ever created. Your test tonight is simply to know it exists and to understand what it teaches, that a stamp's beauty and its value have nothing to do with one another, and the plainest scrap of paper can be the rarest thing on earth. Number 1. The plate number rarity hiding in your own album tonight, and I have saved it for last because it is the one you might genuinely own. Right through the Victorian era, the humble penny red was printed from numbered plates, and every stamp carries its plate number worked tiny into the pattern at the sides. Most plates are common, but a few, the faulty plates pulled from use with almost every stamp destroyed, are worth a fortune. Plate 77 above all, which has sold for well over £100,000, which is more than $130,000, and which looks identical to the hundreds of ordinary penny reds sitting in millions of British albums right now. Your test tonight is the reframe this whole video has been walking you toward. Stop asking whether a stamp looks special, because the rarest ones look utterly ordinary, and start asking 3 questions instead. Who printed it, and from which plate? Is it undamaged and still on its paper? And how many others can possibly have survived? Take a magnifying glass to every penny red in the house and read the plate number in the frame, because that tiny figure is the difference between a stamp worth pennies and a stamp worth a house deposit. Every single stamp tonight came down to the same habit. Turn the page slowly, take a magnifying glass to the corners and the frames, read the postmark, and never soak, peel, or rearrange a thing until you know what you have. Everything valuable in this video looked exactly like the common stamps around it, which is precisely why it survived unnoticed and precisely why it is in danger the day the collection gets cleared. So before the albums go to the charity shop, before your most efficient relative decides the old stamps are just clutter, sit down with them yourself, a magnifier and a good light to hand and a cup of tea beside you, and read every page. And whatever you do, don't sell it yet. Not until you know what you have. If this video has you reaching for that old album right now, press like before you open it. It truly does tell me to keep making these, and subscribe if you have not, because next time we are going through the old coins in the change jar and the biscuit tin, including one ordinary looking penny that sold for a sum that will not let you sleep. Then tell me down in the comments Whose album is it in your house, and how many years since anyone properly looked through it? I read every single one, and somebody watching this tonight is holding a plate number they have never once read. Go and have a proper look in that loft, you never know. See you next time. If anything today looked familiar, have a proper look before you sell a single thing. Everything's in my price guide over at malcolmashby.com, or scan the code on your screen. I'll leave it up for you.